Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Living without a compass, without a sense of direction, is often what the modern human being is living life like. Without a compass. Normally, commonly, this is what we are seeing. This is what is taking place. Seems almost like a very small feather that's being blown left and right, up and down, sideways, completely in the hands of whatever forces that may be around oneself. And there are quite a number of forces around us. Not just around us, but specifically the kind of thoughts that the person has in their mind, and the tendencies that are at play. We don't have the luxury of being poetic here as to how beautiful it is for the little feather to be blown left and right, up and down. Because we're talking about our own life. Because there's a lot of upheavals that a person, a human being, goes through in life and is going through, especially now. And our thoughts usually are given a carte blanche, a free pass, where we do not interrogate them. We don't check the papers of these thoughts. We just accept them as they are. Well, why? Well, because these are our thoughts. This is originating from me. Plus, I have been thinking like this all throughout my life. So there's a connection here. There's a bond here. So there's a genuineness here. There's an element of trust here. I trust my thoughts. And the feather is blown left and right. We just accept whatever our thoughts throw at us. sadly, unless a major incident of loss has taken place in a person's life, some life transforming existential issue that has popped up, the person is not going to pause and consider as to what is happening. They will just go blindly living out their lives, completely trusting in the authenticity, in the goodness, or quote unquote wholesomeness of their thoughts. Meanwhile, nothing could be further from the truth. So when the Buddha talks about avidya, or ignorance, it is this. The mind that sees through avidya is a mind that no longer is willing to buy, to accept what our thoughts are just giving us for us to accept. You start to question. And that is when we have wisdom occurring. We're starting to question as to why. Why do I have the tendency of feeling this way? Let's start with that. Because this happened. Okay. And what was my contribution to that, the thing to happen? Did I have any part in it to play? And we usually have, even if it's something along the lines of us holding a passive position towards something. And the biggest one is holding a position of passivity towards our own life, towards living our own life with responsibility, meaning taking charge of our thoughts, first and foremost, as to what's coming in. What is the traffic like? What is the nature of these thoughts? That is unfortunately not occurring in the world today, especially. Except for here and there, small pockets. And usually on an individual basis. As we probe deeper, we start seeing how big of a role our childhood has had on the very fabric of our understanding of the world. If you have taken some college courses here and there, exposed in maybe even pop psychology, you hear about the influence, the very important influence that our childhood has for the rest of one's life, and specifically at a very young age. What type of exposure did they have? It could be attachment styles. Have they been secure, insecure, ambivalent? What type of bonding has there been, or has there been? Is there just a vacuous state of emotional bankruptcy for the child not to connect with someone? Because the mind is always in motion, even in that state, especially at that state, because the brain is trying to understand the world it has landed into. These people walking around doing things, and its own need for security, survival, sustenance, physical, emotional, cognitive. So usually, there's a lack of healthy input on all these layers. Nevertheless, the child's brain is still going to go ahead and work day and night to try to fill in the gaps. And we fast forward into the future and we see this child grown up as an adult. And living in the midst of chaos, both internal and external. Because the external is simply a manifestation of what is going on the inside. And that's what we've been doing as a population on this planet. We've been spewing, projecting everything, all the chaos that's been going on, the paradigms in our head, in our brain. We've been trying to project it into the world around us and try to fix it somehow. Even though we're living in a chaos. And now we have society coming in, especially this trend of everything secularism is good mentality or delusion. Suddenly we have a totally different spin on what it means to live without a compass, because values keep changing. And already the confused brain of the child, which has now become a confused adult with a lot more power to destroy oneself and the world around them, finds itself always on shaky ground. Meanwhile, they want safety and security. That's not going to be possible so long as we're on this quicksand of values constantly changing and the mind not being anchored on what is wholesome from what is unwholesome. What is wholesome cannot change from one day to the next, like the values of our secular societies. Given the consequences of these actions, be they thought-based, be they verbally or speech-based, the words we use, or they physically based, physical actions we do with our bodies. The damage that an unwholesome thought or word or an action can do is tremendous to another person, to ourselves. So we need to check our value system. And for that, we need to check what type of thoughts are we having on a consistent basis in the mind. Instead of giving the mind a free rein to be just like that feather blown around with the influences that are so many, so many. And this is one of the primary reasons why I consistently mention how important meditation is. It's no longer a luxury, it's a necessity to find that compass, to find that solid ground to question. Not every thought is, in fact, wholesome. Well, surprise, surprise. Simply because I'm thinking about it does not make it right. Because this I that is thinking about these thoughts has a plethora, has like a collection of influences from the outside world, many of which stem from our childhood. A time period that is known for its delusion. Yet we base our entire lives on that without questioning. So meditation, and specifically this path of Lord Buddha that he presented to us, is an opportunity to relive our childhood with the understanding that a mature adult mind could have, that is supported with the necessary data. And that's what the Dhamma is. You no longer are prone to buy whatever your thought or thoughts are throwing at you, and specifically what society is throwing at you. You're no longer a victim, because most of us human beings living on this planet, no matter how many PhDs you have, generally speaking, we are victims to the vomit that the mass media and all these different things that are coming our way, unless we put up the iron walls against the nonsense that we're exposed to. But even if we were living all by ourselves in some kuti, in some hut in the Himalayas or in the desert, we still have our hands full with the work that needs to be done, because he who conquers one's mind is greater in battle than he who wins 1,000 battles with 1,000 armies again and again. Just our own mind. The greatest adversary. So long as the person has not yet tamed it. The Buddha used to be known as the greatest tamer, discipliner. In fact, that's one of his qualifiers, if you will, when we pay homage to him, Lord Buddha. We have a saying, a phrase that says, the tamer of devas and humans. And there's an interesting sutta. It's called Kesi Sutta. Kesi was a horse trainer. And one time he comes over to the Buddha, and the Buddha asks him, Kesi, how do you train your horses? And he says, sometimes you do have horses that see me carrying the whip, and they already shape up. They stand up straight. And they start thinking, oh, what can I do today to show my master that I am this, I am that, I have all these skills? And then he said, Bhante, there's also these other horses that they see the tip of the whip like the other horse, but they just go unaffected until the tip of the whip touches their skin, their flesh. That's when they kind of perk up and sit up and stand up and try to be the best version of themselves. And then he says there's another type of a horse that needs the whip to go into the flesh in order for it to stand up and really become responsible. And then there's a fourth kind where the whip has to go into the bone, he says, for it to get it, and then it perks up. And then he says there's a fifth kind where it doesn't do any of those things. And the Buddha asks, what do you do with him? He says, I kill him. Because I've tried everything else. And then Kesi, interestingly enough, turns to Lord Buddha and asks him, how about you, Lord? How do you train your bhikkhus, their minds? How do you discipline them? And he says, just like you, he says, there are bhikkhus who see me as who see the edge, the tip of the whip, and they already stand up, perk up, and they really go deep in disciplining themselves, the mind especially, practicing the precepts, calming the mind. And there are those, he says, that you really have to touch their skin with the tip of the whip in order for them to get it and to really have them become more engaged with the practice. Take it seriously. And there are those, he says, where the whip has to go into the flesh, where you have to be a little bit more tougher on them, discipline-wise. And then there's a fourth where the whip has to go into the bone for them to get it. And then, as you might have guessed, Kesi goes ahead and asks Lord Buddha, what about those? Do you have those other bhikkhus who, no, despite all these 4 stages, they still don't want to listen? And he says, yes. I killed them, he says. He says, no. How could you say that? You're a samana, you're a holy person, you're a recluse, you're a teacher. You cannot kill anyone. He says, Kesi, in this Dhamma and discipline, in this Dhamma and Vinaya, when the Tathagata speaks of killing, it has different than what you, a common person, a lay person, can understand. He says, what the Tathagata means by that is not the killing, an actual killing of a person, but in the Sangha, he says, there's a practice instituted by the Tathagata, by the Buddha, where about this bhikkhu or bhikkhuni who refuses to listen, who refuses to follow, who refuses to do their work on themselves and in their practice. Once it has been determined that this person is willingly, willfully, and based on ignorance is continuing arrogantly to follow this choice, then the whole Sangha turns their back on this individual, giving him the silent treatment, which is equal to death, he says. And that really turns the person around. There was a case of Channa. Channa was the person who was the Siddhartha Gautama's, before he became a Buddha, the prince, his charioteer. He's the one who actually took Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama, to the edge of the palace, into the forest. So he kept on telling everyone for over 45 years, more than that, in fact, that I was the one. I have a special relationship with Lord Buddha. I was the one who was there before any of you showed up. But he never practiced. He was very conceited. And for so many years, the Buddha tried to get him to practice and to make the most. And he was a bhikkhu too, by the way. And then finally they come and they ask him on his deathbed, the Buddha's deathbed, Bhante, what should we do about Channa? He says, give him that treatment, give him that disciplinary action. And they do. And after his death, when Channa finds out what the Buddha had instructed Sangha to do, he is completely devastated. Imagine the last instruction of your teacher, the one you grew up with, literally, is to tell everyone to turn their back on you. And guess what happens? Channa becomes an arahant because he pushes himself. That is the caliber of our teacher, Lord Buddha. He taught Channa in absentia. So we don't need to discipline other people. We already have our hands full working on our mind. So let us be more courageous, but more alert and wiser in dealing with our own inner narratives, inner dialogue, and specifically by not giving a free pass to each and every thought we have. And instead to work on the practice through meditation to create that calm state where things will really show their true nature. The thoughts will show, the tendencies will show, because we will see the pattern. If D is happening, then it means C has taken place. If C has taken place, then B must have taken place. And then how does B come? I see. It's very simple, but not easy. So that is my invitation for you, encouragement for you to continue on your path. And it's a battle, but we can fight this battle with a smile and with the mind becoming more free every single day through action, through choices of saying yes to some thoughts and no to some others. And really fixing up our childhood. Meditation is about fixing whatever anomalies or screw-ups we've had growing up. And for some, yes, therapy helps also in conjunction with meditation. Meditation has to be there. And the kind of meditation, the Buddha distinguishes between right kind of meditation and wrong kind of meditation. We need to understand that. That's why this is called a wisdom-based path, because it asks questions, because today's understanding needs to help me to get to a better, healthier life tomorrow, a wiser understanding of life, my life tomorrow, once I made this choice. So there is no fooling oneself, wishful thinking at any point on this path. That's why the Buddha says it is to be realized by the wise for themselves. No one has to convince us of anything. So I will stop here and ask questions and hear your thoughts, comments, critiques. Yes, Chitta.
Bhante, thank you. That was a fantastic talk. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I think you touched on something really, well, obviously really important, because when we use our own virtue can become our own compass, can't it? Like alongside the Dharma, like, because the world, when you look outside, it's like it is in some ways, it's completely falling apart. But and it's easy to forget and just get sucked into that. But actually, if you just keep coming back and back to this inside, like the goodness, which I've got to thank you for, because our conversation last week, it just feels like a lifetime ago, because it's been such a significant shift in how I like view myself and how I view like life and even death and everything. It's just been amazing. So I can't really like I will go into probably more detail another time, but what you offered today is just priceless. So thank you very much.
Yes, the virtue, one's own virtue, that's what we're talking about. Ultimately, the sila that we read about of Lord Buddha or the Arahants, or even one's own teachers, it's one's own teacher, somebody else, ultimately. The words that were shared between Kesi and Lord Buddha that I shared with you today, um, discussed it today, that happened 2,600 years ago, approximately. The words that we get in the Pali Canon, if it is uh, completely removed from the other stuff that have been added, just that earliest set of conversations that the Buddha had, still, those are other people's conversations. They can only serve to inspire us, to help us on still a superficial level until one actually takes them in and, as you pointed out, makes it one's own virtue. It turns them into one's own truth. And that is what is necessary. Oftentimes, students of meditation or any spiritual path will latch on to this teacher, to that teaching. And it's like that child that presses its nose, its face against the window glass, the window pane of a pastry shop, and imagines oneself eating all these different types of delicious pastries, and then goes home and says, I had this, I had that, I had this, I had that, I had this. Because every time the door opened, the whiff of all this aroma of the pastries would come in, and he would think that he actually ate them. Because you're close, you're seeing them in a sense. That's one way of looking at what does usually happen when we don't check. Okay, how is this impacting my life? Is my relationship changing with my loved ones when I leave the retreat and come home and talk about other mundane things with family members or my dog or my cat, where they don't necessarily know anything about jhanas, anything about the Dhamma? Who cares for them? These things are totally not important. So what is important is my connection with them, my interactions with them. Well, that's what the Dhamma is. That's why some of the Arahants, when they speak about the Dhamma being in one's chitta, in one's heart, as well as the kileshas being in one's heart. What is the dominant? It's not in the book. It's not in the suttas. That's what I'm trying to say. So yes, we need to have that personal compass. Otherwise, it's somebody else's compass. I don't want to follow the Buddha's compass. I will be inspired, however, by the great teacher and try to find that compass within my heart and find my defilements there. Ah, I see you. I see you. And then take the necessary steps. Because the Buddha was awakened 2,600 years ago. Mission accomplished, done. No more death, No more birth, rather. That's it. Done. So how am I coming with that? Am I moving along in that direction? That's what the Buddha would ask. Thank you for sharing. Other thoughts? Yes, KK.
Thank you for the great talk. Both parts are very helpful to me. The part about learning to have one's own compass, and the second part about the different level where you can train a horse. I'm dealing with a really reckless son right now because of his bipolar tendency, reckless behavior. So I will try to kill it if I am desperate about what else to do. So thank you. But I want to go back to the whole thing about the moral compass or the compass. I think you already answered my question, but my initial question is that how do we know, how can we be confident in our own compass? In other words, is it very arrogant to say that, oh, when I'm meditating, I know exactly what is wholesome and what is unwholesome? And I think you gave two answers during your talk. One is that you need the teacher. You need to work with a teacher. You need to work with a bhikkhu, or you need to work with, we have you, so we're very, very, very grateful. But the other answer is that during meditation, maybe we have that kind of a calmness that would enable us to see, to get close to that. But I'd like you to expand on how do we become confident and without becoming arrogant, saying that, yeah, I know what's wholesome and what's unwholesome. Thank you.
I love the way you premised it. I love the way you created a foundation of making it easier for all listeners to relate better with whatever I will be offering here. Yes. The Buddha talked about Nibbana as not being a state of mind that is agitated. The Buddha used a lot of negative language to describe Nibbana, by the way. That's the best way that one can talk about Nibbana, because it is the unconditioned. Now, one of the symbols, one of the first things that, or flavors that Nibbana requires is an unagitated mind, meaning a mind that is calm, peaceful, but at the same time there is non-remorse, non-guilt present with that non-agitated state. So when a person is engaged in an action, they have to have an understanding in their mind as to why am I doing this? Meaning the values, meaning the compass. So if I am committing a type of action, including speech, including a thought, if I'm entertaining a type of a thought that is going to make me say things in a subvocal way in my mind, words that if I were to open my lips and speak them out, I know that I would be breaking a precept. Or an action I'm thinking of. Oh yes, I'm coveting, let's say. I want to do this to someone else. I want to harm someone. Or I wish they die. Or I wish this happens to them. You know, you see this a lot during political upheavals. People saying in their minds, doing things, but on the outside you see them as very upright citizens, this and that. But meanwhile, if you give them a hatchet, they'll be one of the Mongol soldiers, you know? So there's all this chaos happening. Now, if the person has the proper understanding, however, they will immediately see the connection between the negative state that follows committing to such a choice in action, whether it's thought, speech, or action, physical action, bodily action. Because this is what we mean by akusala, by the way, unwholesome, because of its immediate and after effect. Immediate and after effect. Because if it is wholesome, it will not leave the aftertaste of, I wish I didn't say that. There isn't that remorse, feeling of guilt. And also, it doesn't have other manifestations of us having done a non-virtuous act, because there's a physiological direct effect of the choices we make. That's why even meditation, if we're doing the wrong kind of meditation, you're going to have a very rigid mind. That's why I'm somewhat critical of 10-day retreats that, they're very prevalent these days, where not enough instructions are given to students, especially those that have never been exposed to it, to the Dhamma, to the path. What they do is they kind of implode. They force their way. It's like almost like hammering your way, sledgehammering your way through. And at the end of such retreats, usually what happens is there's a tightness in the mind, and the person's facial muscles are so rigid. But the ego is very happy because they've just completed the 10-day retreat and they didn't speak a word. I dare you to do that. That's the mindset. This is unwholesome. This is not meditation. There's not a single iota of wisdom occurring. But it is an after effect of choices. So we shouldn't be just blindly taking even meditation. So I was referring to coveting earlier. So that's why I wanted to do the contrast. But the common denominator between these two is, how is the consequence of each of these actions registering as? And is there calmness, tranquility in the mind, meaning opening the door for wisdom taking place, or not? So this is another distinguishing factor between choosing akusala or kusala, unwholesome versus wholesome. One knows for sure in themselves, in their body, in their brain, in their mind, in their emotional, psychological state, if the thing that they are about to commit, because already it starts, the needle starts moving on the seismic scale in the mind when I'm about to break a precept. And the deeper the person's practice gets, the more they are acquainted with themselves and what tiny subtle things are happening in the mind, the better they will be able to catch it early on rather. Because they will notice the agitation taking place versus there not being the agitation. So the Buddha was not like a prude, or he wasn't just like, yes, you have to stop doing this, stop doing that. Some people actually misinterpreted his position or his intent. What he was after is simply calm the mind down. Because that's when things become very clear. That's where we get the phrase, yatha bhutang pajanati. The person, through sati and sampajanya, through mindfulness and clear understanding, gets to see and know for oneself how things come to be. But that will not take place if the mind is agitated. It's impossible. The breaking of the precepts will make it impossible. That's another reason why we don't do unwholesome things. Plus, there's also the karmic effect of it. You do bad thing, guess what's going to happen? Action, reaction. Newton said quite a bit on that a few centuries earlier. So I hope that somewhat addresses your question? What? Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Still have some time. It is a fun journey. We don't have to reminisce about our childhood, the good part of our childhood, or parts of it. There's a playfulness that comes in your attitude towards life with this practice. In the Dhammapada, I believe it's 279, the Buddha says how, this is, we're the happy ones. He says something like that. Happiness is our normal state. When he says us, he's talking about Sangha of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis practicing the Dhamma. So, but it needs to be brought in. It needs to be brought in. We're bringing in other gunk. We're bringing in other stuff into our lives. And it's not like something being added, another layer being imposed on the mind. This is something I used to do a lot, and then I realized that I'm, trying to put something on top of already something that's already there. I'm putting another layer of it to convince myself that it's there. So, yes, Chitta.
It's like KK's question sort of like leads on from like your advice that you like gave me so very well like the other week, and just one thing I would like to add like to your like wonderful like answer was that when KK mentioned about like maybe being like to think it could be maybe conceited to think that you just definitely know what's unwholesome and what's wholesome, but if you're in like meditation or if you're just sat enjoying like loving kindness like in your own front room or something, then to just pay attention to how much of a good person you are just for doing that. There's nothing wrong in acknowledging how amazing that act actually is. I was watching a TV show with my wife this week, and something like some horrendous figure, like something like 500,000 men in the UK have watched like child like images on the internet. So what we're doing in comparison to that, we should be giving ourselves credit, for just radiating loving kindness out like this. It's just amazing, and for so long, like for 38 years in my life, I didn't realize like how much of a good person I was until, like, thankfully, like some really amazing Dharma friends and teachers have pointed me in that direction over and over, and it's just something that there's no point in wasting any time doing anything other than appreciating the goodness that we've got. Because compared to what's going on in the world, we might not be perfect, but we might as well be compared to what's going on, So I just wanted to share that, so thank you.
Thank you for that. So true. We never take the time of day to pause because, again, perhaps with many of us, or some of us, we have a childhood where we might have been told, Johnny, you're not supposed to think such highly of yourself, so highly of yourself, or don't, like, maybe it was in the classroom, maybe it was a teacher telling us, you shouldn't talk openly and so highly of yourself, or don't think highly of yourself, mister, or something like that. And that goes deep into the mind of the child. We don't know where the teacher or the adult was coming from by saying that. But for the child who already doesn't have necessary data that will become gospel for the rest of one's life. And now when I really have to have a hard time, I have a hard time actually trying to tell people to look at the good side of their character. I mean, as especially in the case of patients, clients, I sit down and listen to what they've done and their relationships, and then I see there's some jewels here which are completely neglected. And the same goes for meditation students, of course. We completely like brush off over those. Like, yeah. But this you have to see, doc. This is big. This is, I have done this. But what about that? So we're not fair to ourselves when it comes to starting from a good place. Many times metta students have a hard time bringing up that good thought, good image, good feeling in their heart to generate. Many people have come to me and said, Bhante, I'm sorry, but I can't generate it easy enough. Like it doesn't come to me. And I ask, can you see yourself being happy at any point? Would you like to be happy at any point? And then the facial muscles relax a little bit. And probably they want some ice cream. Probably they want something that they never got. A caress when they were a child, let's say. A mother caressing her fingers over their hair. Or how their pet feels. Suddenly, ooh. And the mind is uplifted. That's goodness. And these are things that they have gone through themselves, so they can relate to this and with this. So there's nothing wrong with seeing these positive side of oneself. And obviously using wisdom not to be stuck there, but use it as a springboard. But we have to start from somewhere. And starting with your own inherent goodness of things that you have done and tasted and felt, experienced, is a solid place to start. Any other thoughts, questions? One of the ways to insulate the mind, by the way, is by exposing ourselves, the mind, to the suttas, to the teachings. Because there's all this data coming in. And if you are going to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to shut the TV and from now on, I'm not going to watch CNN or MSNBC or any of the news, or anything out there. Well, that's good, but usually we need to substitute it with something else, at least in the beginning stages. So what can we do? Well, the mind needs to be given some data. It was used to it. So you stop the flow of negative influences. We need to introduce it to a new set of data that are the opposite. So one of the things that I recommend sources would be the Dhammapada. They're short and they usually have a lovely background as to what brought it about, the Buddha to say those words. They're not like the suttas. They're usually very short, a few lines. There's so many of them that are free. There's written versions of it, and there's also obviously the audio recordings that I personally have done. There's other ones as well. There's even one that I saw in Italian. They're definitely is the series of the suttas. So exposing yourself, maybe make a goal. You know, today I'm going to read 1 or 2 lines or a whole sutta, depending on how much time you have. And try to see if it can resonate with me and see what I can learn from it. And have your journal next to you during the day. And write down, share with yourself just what's going on. It can be quite a revelatory experience. Because the mind always is in search of something to chew on. It's like a sponge. It wants things, to absorb things. So might as well give it something wholesome, because that's not going to happen in a vacuum. And hearing once a week a Dhamma talk is not going to be enough. It's good, but it's not enough. We do have a few more minutes, if in case. Kesi, it's KK's question. Kesi is K-E-S as in Simon, I, Kesi. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya. I translated it, I think, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. Kesi, the horse trainer. There's different versions of it, of course. There's the one with Bhante Sujato on Sutta Central. There's Bhikkhu Bodhi's version. There's Ajahn Tanisaro's on Access to Insight. And there's my version, the recording on YouTube. So, among others, of course. Yeah, making it interesting. Oh, yes, Russell, I didn't see you. Hand.
Oh, thank you, Bhante, again. I just wanted to share something a little funny. Recently, because I reached a certain age, I've been getting all these phone calls and notices about funeral plots, long-term health insurance, insurance about this and that. And, you know, and then, I don't know, it's, on the one hand, it's a little bit disturbing. And then I was thinking that, you know, their whole premise is, you know, to ensure, you know, that your descendants will, you know, won't suffer, and, you know, they will have some of your assets and so forth, so forth. Like yesterday, one woman called and said, you know, you need to get this insurance. It's $500 a month. I said, you know, and all this type of thing. And it was really odd that basically there's so many businesses nowadays, you know, when you reach a certain age, probably if you're over 65 or 70, to get you to plan for the next step, which is death. But then, you know, I find that coming to, you know, meditation sessions actually is better insurance, and, you know, in a sense, because it's a mental preparation rather than this material way that all these people are trying to sell me this stuff. So anyway, I just thought it would be amusing. The most amusing part was once that was trying to sell me something, cremation at Forest Lawn, and they said, well, I said, well, what's the difference between you and other places? You seem pretty expensive. He said, we only do 2 bodies a day. We actually even make a video, so you know that, you know, what goes in is the same whatever that comes out. And I said, you know, that's really interesting, and, you know, I'm a film guy and I really like to watch the video, but I guess in this case I wouldn't be able to watch it, right? And whatever. So I mean, the whole business, I mean, what I'm just saying is that the whole business of dying is kind of opposite to what you have mentioned, and what, of course, the different sutras and Buddhist books talk about in terms of mortality and stuff. But it is a little disturbing because you get hit on so much by not by romance, but by all these insurance against I guess insurance. I don't know. It's some kind of this so-called insurance, and of course they're making money. So anyway, I just wanted to say that the meditation sessions are a nice counterpoint for all this type of other stuff that's out there.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and thank you for sharing that. It's and in a way it's sad and funny at the same time how even before birth we're living in a consumer society. Before birth the parents are involved. There's so many new ceremonies being added to the mix, like the gender reveal, the this and that, and so much money is being spent. And now if you're doing a gender reveal, for example, you need to have at least a drone somewhere capturing this moment, and it has to be very bombastic. It has to really be out there, flamboyant. And I think this past summer there was a fire that was started because of a gender reveal. It's so sad. But then you go ahead into the birth of the child, another slew of, well, you must do this, you must do that, you must buy this. You're not the one who's buying them, obviously, you're an infant. And then going to this school, that school, etc., buying this house, getting this mate, buying this for your mate, etc. And then AARP comes in, and then you have to buy funeral stuff eventually. And then what happens? I think we're still better off than we were a few centuries ago, where the church, I think Catholic Church, not to put them down necessarily, but this was, I think other churches might have been doing this too, where they were selling, I forgot the term for it in English, but they were selling you resorts and villas in heaven. Yeah, I mean, for centuries, that's what they've been doing. Up until only about a century ago, when it was like people really developed this thing called intellect, and they said, wait a minute. But people were making profits of it. So yes, we are being seen as, okay, let's squeeze as much dough as we can, as much money as we can from these people while they're alive, because once you're out, you're no longer susceptible to their business or money-making strategies. So I'm glad the meditations are helping you to see, and for you to see it as a counterpoint using your work, because it's
yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Oh no, so I actually have my own insurance. It's actually these lines from the Diamond Sutra, about the bubble and the lightning and those beautiful lines. They've been translated in many ways, and so I kind of put that in my will. So I just said, okay, when I go, you have somebody has to read it. I don't care what language. So just these 4 lines, just so for me, so profound about transcendence and stuff, and that kind of recognition is, well, then you don't need insurance. I mean, you don't need that, the kind of insurance they're selling anyway. So anyway,
there's in the case of Lord Buddha, when he died, he didn't care about his relics, the ash. He said, looking at the bhikkhus, he said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, of course, leave that to the other people, leave that to the lay people, he says, because the focus was on the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis for them to do the work. So the Buddha's emphasis was, you need to do your work. Who cares about this, the body left over? And people started fighting over it, the princes and the kings and different city dwellers, all these things that came in, and they said, we want a portion of the Lord Buddha's relics. There was fighting going on after the fact, but I wish they had actually put even 1/100th of that energy that they put in obtaining some relics into sitting their butts down, excuse my French, and doing the work. Doing the work. We don't do that. So death is a wonderful impetus. It's a driver to help a person really push themselves out of the ditch that could have been the rest of their earlier lives and do something with this life and really turning it around to gain that state of unagitated, liberated mind, which is doable, which is there for us to experience. And leaving the body behind. I mean, I used to joke around and tell my family and friends and even students sometimes, when the moment comes, just toss me in a garbage can. I don't care. Who cares? Well, we need to build this. Who cares? Ultimately. And when my mother died, I was mentioning this to my sister, we were talking about nostalgia, this and that. I said, but do you remember when we saw, or Dad, he died recently, the moment he had left, you as a child of this person who you've known for a long time, suddenly you recognize that person no longer being there, even though this so-called body is there, but they themselves are no longer there. You know this viscerally in your gut, in your heart. So then the body just is an empty shell. You really see that. So let's try to look at these as opportunities to really do the work that what the Dhamma is trying to teach us, and to take the challenge and to go on this personal journey to make it happen. Thank you for sharing, everyone who shared. So let us do the dedication of merits. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired for the achievement of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you for joining. I just remembered tomorrow I will be giving a Dhamma talk with the IBMC, International Buddhist Meditation Center in Los Angeles. It will be at 11 a.m. Los Angeles or Pacific Standard Time, 11 a.m. So I'm just mentioning this in case you would like to follow or watch. I believe they always put it on YouTube eventually. So in a day or two or sometimes a week. So other than that, please stay safe, practice diligently, and may you become like Kesi's first example. Where we
get the link to your talk tomorrow? How can we get the link to the talk tomorrow?
Oh, it's I'll ask Dhammadina to send you. It's basically the same link as was sent previously, and I believe the password is just IBMC, no spaces. Or Greg, if you have it, I appreciate it if you could send it. I'll wait until I won't close this window, so you have it. Yes. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
So be well, stay safe, and let's maintain a fun journey. And check the papers of our thoughts. It's an old term, like from Nazi movies. Check the papers. But we need to investigate and not give them carte blanche to these thoughts that keep coming in and roaming about. It's valuable real estate up there, what we put in the mind. So let's only put whatever is good and wholesome. With that, may you all be well and safe. The blessings of the Triple Gem. Sukhi Hod.
Sadhu, Bhante, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante.